Welcome in, everyone. That GD show again. Hey, Genevieve.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, good. Say hello to Marcia Wickham, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Marcia. Calm down, Marcia. Calm down. Calm down.
It's been a long day.
That's okay. We're going to get it going. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We've got, first off, you'll see in the chat, we do have some content warnings for tonight's show. We'll be talking about some very difficult subjects, specifically rape, incest, sexual abuse as a whole, and topics related to those things and how we deal with them, specifically how the church doesn't deal with them well, and so on. So just be warned. I want you to be sure that if that's not something that you're okay with and that you can handle, please don't feel bad about excusing yourself and taking the night off. So just want to get that out there. Mm-hmm. Genevieve, how are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to fix my blurry face.
Yeah, I you're still got the blurry going.
I know. I thought we'd fix this, but yeah, I obviously, Marcia, I spoke to you when you called in during our New Year's show. I think that was.
Yeah.
And then last night I watched your documentary, and I went through so many different emotions, from just rage to a heartbreaking empathy to anger to frustration. I can't imagine the world through your eyes, and I also can't imagine the immense strength and courage you have, and just how wonderful you are, and how glad that I am that you're here, not just on our show, but here on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you. I really, really appreciate the support and the encouragement. And I'm not, I don't feel like there's anything super special or courageous. I feel like, I'm so aware with every passing year of how many of us there are. And so I think you just do what you have to do, and you survive, and you want to hopefully recover, and that's something worth fighting for. So it's a climb, but worthwhile.
Yeah, your recovery and your survival, first of all, and recovery, and just the fact that you have recovered to become to be just a happy, healthy person. I've told you before, and I've told others, you're a hero of mine. I've known you for several years, and see, I'm already getting emotional. God damn it!
I started a little bit already.
Oh man!
5 minutes in, for fuck's sake!
Don't make me hold the show. Come on.
Oh God, hold it together.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I've been proud to know you and got to meet you last year and a half ago. And just am such a fan of yours, and impressed by your story, and the viewers will know why after we talk about that for the next hour and a half. But it's a call-in show. So Genevieve, how do they call in?
So you can call us at 217-375-9933. We would love to hear from you.
Yes, please. If as we talk and you want to ask Marcia something, or you want to weigh in on the conversation, please get on the phone, give us a call. We'll take your call. We'll add you to the conversation. If you've had experiences similar to this, and you want to share in that conversation, we'd love to hear from you, and Marcia would too. So let us know. We're open, and the lines are open. As always, hit the like and subscribe button. We'd love for you to do that. Support the channel. Because of the content matter tonight, YouTube will demonetize us. There won't be any ads for this episode. So if you want to support what we're doing, you can still send the super chats. We appreciate your support in that way. You can always support us via becoming a Patreon. We appreciate that. If you like what we do, then we appreciate your support. If you don't like what we do, then that's okay. There's other channels out there. But we do like to have these conversations that need to be had. Topics that need to be discussed, and tonight's is one of those. As we said earlier at the top of the show, content warning here if you're just tuning in, and we'll post it here along the way, but we will be talking about sexual abuse, specifically rape and incest. It's a difficult topic, but it needs to be talked about, and we need to not shy away from these things and the effect it has on people. I see you, asexual atheist. You're $9.99. I appreciate that support. And I got cookies. There you are. $20. She says, screw you, YouTube. That's exactly right. We shouldn't be scolded for talking about important things. My God.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And there's what there. Yeah, that's adding. It's adding to the problem. Yeah,
it is.
Sure.
Adds insult to injury, as they say. But we'll talk more about that as we go. But Marcia, how long have we known each other now?
Oh my
virtually?
gosh. I want to think. I think I came across your video, like it was all the way back. I want to say 2012 or 2013. Like seriously, that's when I remember coming across your. Whenever you, maybe it was later than that, but whenever you did that video. That video you did at the one church where you were talking
that's
about
right.
what it's like to lose faith. I thought it was somewhere in that time frame, like maybe 2013.
It was probably, no, it wouldn't have been that early. It was probably 2014 or 15.
Okay. Yeah. And then
the very first video I had on YouTube.
I didn't know who you were. I had no idea who you were. I showed it to my brother-in-law and I was like, look at this guy. Like, he's like me. Like he doesn't believe anymore, but he's telling, these other people, what it's like to not believe anymore. And, so then you showed up in, I think either Life After God or Everyone's Agnostic, one of those that I was, circulating in some of those post-theistic communities. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the guy from the video.
The guy from the video.
Yeah. You were like, and you were, and I was at that time also really doing a lot of interviewing pastors, fundamentalist pastors in particular, for a writing project, which I'm still sitting on, about the church and sexual abuse and response to sexual abuse and that sort of thing. But you had been a pastor. And so, it was just we started talking and kind of known you ever since then. So,
yeah, I remember that now. You were, I think you had this ongoing conversation with a pastor for a long time about how they didn't handle sexual abuse in the church.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually should have gotten him to call in because he's, I still have some communication with him. We talked for like a year and a half or maybe even 2 years exclusively about that topic and about, and he is fundamentalist, the one that I had an extensive, long conversation with from Texas. And, it was a difficult exchange, honestly, but I was glad he was willing to hang in there. He's very involved in apologetics. So, that factored into things, but I feel like that was a good thing to have happen, a good exchange.
Yeah. And
eye-opening and
if I remember, you were wanting to see if I could get other pastors who were still in the faith to talk with you. And it's hard to get them to talk.
Yes.
They don't want to talk. No,
not really.
Not about this.
No. And it's because it goes okay until you hit on certain points and then it gets weird. And then usually they kind of make an excuse or something and fall away. That's been my experience anyway. It'll start out with a bang and, we'll really get into stuff. And then once I start really getting into the nitty gritty of the difficulties of survivors, that the difficulties of the theology specific to fundamentalist and evangelical Christianity, once I start getting into how that gets processed in the mind of a survivor and what is actually happening there, it gets pretty hairy. But this guy hung in there. I mean, he did, but most won't. So.
Well, they get defensive as to how the church does or doesn't handle these things.
Well, right. And I'm mellowing a little over the years. I've learned that if you just come in with, your guns blazing and, go after certain things like, patriarchy or whatever, I mean, that's like instant shutdown. So you have to come at it a little bit differently if you want to have a mutually respectful conversation and if you want to be heard on any level. So.
Well, we're going to get into your story a little bit. Genevieve, did you put the link to the documentary in the chat, or where is that now? How can people access that?
I posted it a little bit ago, but if you look at the chat right now, you should see it as well. There's a Vimeo link with a password as well. It is password protected. But I just watched it last night. I highly recommend everybody who is watching this go see that, because it was a phenomenal and heartbreaking time that I think is important for everybody.
Yeah, it's not graphic. I should mention that for anybody who's concerned that there might be graphic recreations or depictions of things that would make them uncomfortable. I think one of the things that I loved about working with John and the other people involved in the project is that we managed to convey the I think, spot on the kinds of emotions without needing to be uncomfortably graphic. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, it was well done, very well done in that regard. Marcia, move your camera just a hair. We're cutting off the side of your face. There we go.
Are we better? Let me see.
You want to center yourself. Right there is what we want. Right there. Okay. Perfect.
There we go. Okay.
We want to see all of you.
Okay.
So I want us to get into your story. If you could summarize if someone said, I heard there was a documentary made about you, Marcia, how would you summarize that documentary in an elevator ride?
I would say yes. It was about the incest that I endured from the time I was 8 until I was 14 by my dad, and the way that he suddenly became a born-again Christian, and voila, no more incest, and he's a new man in Christ, and everyone around me suddenly expected me to relate to his new identity, and no apologies were made and no mention was made of the past 6 years of this incest. And I was really kind of left sitting on the pew to figure it out, and, when it was brought up, it was, I was told that, I needed to forgive him and move on. And that's what, the other people in my life seemed to be doing, and everybody just he was their star convert, and everybody went on about what an incredible man he was. And I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to do that too. So, I tried my best to do that. But like any deep-seated trauma in childhood will do, it rears its ugly head. You can only stuff that down for so long and pretend it's, you're okay with it. And eventually it will.
And you were 14 at this time when he
stopped,
found Christ?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Prior to that, just give us a little bit of the story, if you will. Your parents split up when you were 7?
Yeah, 7. Yeah. And I went and lived with my mom across town or in a different town, and my brother stayed with my dad, and I would visit my dad on the weekends. But I didn't see him for a while, like for, I think, the better part of a year after they first split, until finally my brother caught up with me at my new school and then said, Dad's getting visitation rights. You're going to start to get to see Dad. And I was real excited. And then, right from that first visit, they were Sunday afternoons. The incest began. And then that was it became a ritual. So
you were 8 years old at that time.
Yeah.
And that started on the very first visit.
Yes. Yep. It was,
and it went on for 6 years.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, there were a few exceptions on Sundays, where there might have been a different activity but for the most part, even if we did something else, that got out of the way first. That was the first thing upon hitting the apartment for the visit. So,
is there ever a part of you that wondered, is that why because you went a year without him seeing you, and then he got a lawyer and went after visitation rights.
Right.
Was there ever a part of you that wondered, is that the main reason?
Yeah, I honestly, I never heard anybody say this before, but one time there was a therapist working with my son. I have a son, adopted son with special needs, and he was working with a therapist at the time. And this guy said, he said he knew that I had, had this in my past. And at that point I was being already pretty open about it and talking about it. And he said, it's not uncommon sometimes for men to be so vindictive after a divorce scenario that they'll take things out on the child like that, because they're trying to get back at the wife, which was really bizarre thinking. But I kind of think it was probably not so much that, I mean, there was a lot of bitterness. They only spoke through attorneys, but I'm guessing the sickness was there earlier than that. My brother, my parents were actually divorced before they had me. I was a product of reconciliation. They were divorced for 4 years from the time my brother was 2 until he was 6. Yeah. So I suspect that there was issues all along that my mom never was forthcoming about. And, so I don't, it's possible that was, that I was the object of his affection in that way. Although nothing ever happened to me, to my recollection prior to that would lead me to believe, that he was thinking of me in that way, or, I was really young and may not have picked up on it. If he was looming around my bed at night or something, I wouldn't know. So,
yeah, you were so young, and you just don't think of a parent in that way. You don't think that they're a danger. You trust them, and that's the problem.
Absolutely.
With something like this, is you have that implicit trust, and then there's the confusion when that trust is broken, and the film it tells it in a really heartbreaking way. It's a very descriptive way that you tell of that first experience and your confusion around that.
Yeah. And it was bizarre.
Yeah, I can't even fathom it. And you suspect he was doing the same to your brother, but you don't know.
At one point, my brother did acknowledge that. These days, he denies it. I thought I was going crazy because he's denying it now. And yet I had another family friend confirm to me that my brother did acknowledge it to him as well. So I know I'm not out of my mind in that it was actually acknowledged at one point. What's going on now, I don't know. I mean, that relationship is not one that I can maintain. So
he's how much older?
6 years older than me. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and the film talks about that, and he chose not to be involved in your documentary as well as your mom.
Yes, we all very much wanted their participation, even if their whole recollection of events was different than mine, or even if they were angry, they could have gone on the record and been angry and said, we don't understand why she's airing our family's dirty laundry or any of that. Just in order to have that sort of cohesive piece. But my mom at first gave me some pictures. When she found out I was doing this, she was actually almost mildly supportive in the beginning. She gave me some pictures from when I was in school, and I told her, what the plan was and how we were doing this. And then once she found out the camera crew was showing up at our old house that we lived in, she got real funny. Then she was like, I think it just hit home, oh, everyone's going to know, or something, something changed. And then my brother was just, he wouldn't touch it. He would have no part of it. He was quite literally running away when they were trying to sort of catch up with him and ask him, can you, do you want to participate, or, speak your side of things or whatever. So they wouldn't.
And you were willing to have them tell their version of the story.
Absolutely.
But they still didn't want to be involved in it. Mm-mm. Well, as you and I've talked offline, the subject of incest and rape can elicit so many different ideas in people, and there's such shame around it that people want to just avoid it, and that's part of the problem, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think everybody's got their own set of feelings, because incest doesn't happen in isolation. There are always dynamics in place that other people have contributed to how someone stays silent, or how how a child ends up unsupervised with somebody for long periods of time, or how there's no communication about. My mother literally did not want to know anything that was going on at my dad's. It didn't matter if I was playing Barbies or seeing a movie, or, I wasn't supposed to talk about that. She was adamant, that was off limits. And so when you do that, when you have these different dynamics in place that make it so that a child isn't safe or free to express what's going on in any scenario, then everybody has their own set of feelings around that. What role did they play and how did this happen? And, so they both like to do this whole, like, we didn't know, we weren't there. That was at his visits at his place. And, we had nothing to do with it. That's never the case. Everybody involved had something to do with it. Everybody in my life at that time had something to do with it. There were lots of red flags that got ignored. Lots of dynamics in place. My mother was big on corporal punishment. If you want your children to trust you and feel safe with you, it's a good idea not to hit them. That alone would have been helpful in terms of, my willingness to be able to say something that was difficult for me, or that I thought I might get in trouble for.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that, I know you can't speak for your mom and your brother, but, when I think of parents and when I think of older siblings, especially older brothers, we have this idea that they're there as, our protector. They want to be there to protect and provide for the people in their lives. Do you think that some of their reaction right now is just coming out of shame because they know they failed you so deeply?
I believe so. Sure. I mean, because I can put myself in their place and I can imagine if it was my child and something went on, I would be going, how did this happen? And, what was my part in it? And absolutely. Yeah. And I think in my brother's case, especially because, he was there for some of it, and he and his girlfriend were kind of aware of what was happening and chose to get up and leave. We had, that conversation, and I can imagine too, especially if he had been victimized, and I believe he had, that would have been an extremely difficult position to be in as a teenager. And this was the 70s, like nobody was talking about this yet. I mean, so just people's ideas that somebody should just go break the door down, and, there's all this sick rumination going on. You're like, that can't be happening. Like your mind, it's severed in two places. The one of you is going, I see this, I know what all the evidence is telling me. And the other part of your mind's going, no way. Like it's very hard to explain to somebody how you can't just act in those scenarios.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance there.
Absolutely.
Your brain is telling you one thing is happening, and your other part of your brain is telling you these kinds of things don't happen.
Right. It's like and I did it too. Like it's a denial.
Exactly.
It's like I did it. That's how I survived it. Like each time was kind of like, I would tell myself,
let's get this over with, and then I can go play.
Yes. Right. I would tell myself some whole other thing about it in my mind. And yeah, exactly. Let's get it over with. And it was, most of the time, it was a pretty quick, I bet you most times we're talking 15, 20 minutes, maybe, It just depended. There was a little ritual that always went with the whole thing. And, when it was done, he would sleep. He would crash and go to sleep. And I would be reading the set of encyclopedias that was there, watching what 3 channels he got on TV.
And you had to just do your time until you could go home.
Right. I looked forward to McDonald's. That was the thing. And then, my brother got mad at me because I got McDonald's and he didn't. So I would tell him I paid for that McDonald's.
Yes, you did.
I paid.
Oh my God.
Happy
you
meal.
Paid.
I paid. Yeah.
You weren't raised in a Christian home. This, where was your first introduction to Christianity and religion and faith?
Well, my parents sent us down the road to it was actually a fundamentalist church, but we only went to the Sunday school. My brother and I would go alone. They didn't come with us, and we'd go do the whole memorize your Bible verses and go to Sunday school and color Jesus pictures and all that stuff. So when after the divorce, my mom became a secretary in the United Church of Christ, which was a liberal kind of progressive denomination, but it was in Center City, Reading, and it was mostly a congregation of much older people, sort of a dying congregation, and a lot of geriatric people. So that was a positive. That wasn't a bad experience. I mean, those people were very nice, and I sang in the choir, and it wasn't until I was like 12-ish that my brother, because he had met this Mennonite girl in his public school, he got born again, quote unquote, and asked to take me out to a friendlies, and there told me about Jesus and how I was going to hell, and that whatever I'd been taught in my mom's church wasn't right, because it said right there in the Bible, that I needed to know that if I didn't accept Jesus, I was going to go to hell. And of course, in my mind, I was, bad, and of course I was going to go to hell. This all made perfect sense to me. So I was on board. I sat right there in friendlies and prayed with them, and
prayed the sinner's prayer at friendlies. I love
right there in friendlies
Yeah.
over my hot fudge sundae. I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Just punch that ticket, baby.
Yeah. So,
oh my God. Yeah. By the way,
so-
folks, we have lines open. If you're in the chat, if you're watching and you'd like to ask Marcia something or talk about this, 217-375-9933. I saw the number, Genevieve. Call in. We'd love to have you on the conversation. Do you remember, Marcia, wondering, where's God? Here's an 8-year-old girl being raped regularly by her dad. Did you ever remember crying out to God?
Yes.
God, can you save me? Can you stop this?
Yep.
What was going through your mind in that time?
I thought he would. I thought he was going to do something, that I remembered singing that Bible song, that little, we are weak, but he is strong, so in my mind, this was who protected you and helped you. And in all my little Sunday school classes, that's what I remembered. And, I don't know, it was,
do you remember getting mad at God, or was there any sense of, where the fuck are you, God?
Not when I was little. I mean, I was confused, but I didn't have that yet.
Okay.
It was more like I always just thought I was doing something wrong. Like I was either not praying right, or maybe I didn't memorize my verse right, or, maybe I did something bad that week. I don't know, took something out of my brother's bedroom I wasn't supposed to. So, like how your kid's mind works. I did something, so that's probably why he wasn't doing anything, because
right.
I wasn't a good girl, and I did something, I disobeyed or whatever. As I got older, that was a little different, that changed. But honestly, anger, the rage kind of anger, that I wasn't in touch with until I was much older, till after attempted suicide, really. And till I could make the connection between doing that and being angry, because my therapist says, it's not exactly an act of kindness. You're killing somebody or trying to. So, that then I was able to really realize murderous rage. But I think the anger was there. I would, I pulled all my doll's eyelashes out, and I was, I remember just feeling a lot of frustration, but I don't think I wasn't good at identifying my feelings at all. Like this is anger, this is fear, this is sadness. I had to learn all of that in my 20s. When I got into therapy, I just had I didn't have language to put with my feelings. I was really living very plastic-y,
Yeah, I know that, you talk about how when you're crying out to God and all of this stuff is happening, you were blaming yourself. What did I do wrong? What did I do? I must have done something to deserve this. Hell. But as you got a little older, but before you turned 14, was there ever a time, because that's usually when, in my experience, we get introduced to purity culture and the abstinence talk
Oh,
and all
right.
of these things that,
Mhm.
that they say that, if you don't save yourself, then, you're used goods and all of these horrible things
Mhm.
that would
Oh
be.
my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how was that, knowing that you had no control over that
Right.
for so long?
Yeah, no, I was already like in my mind, I was already, corrupted or, so, by the time, I was in 11th grade and, it was already like, in my mind, it didn't matter what I did anymore. Like, um, I
You
don't know
just
quite how
felt
to explain that.
full
Like,
full of shame and guilt. You just were dirty and nothing mattered because you're already damaged goods.
right. And I already knew, like, I knew how to do that. So it wasn't anything new. Like, it wasn't like, I can't explain it, but it wasn't like girls waiting around to have their first experience. And, I mean, I kind of hoped it would be somewhat different somehow, but it was also, I can't explain. There was so much I was not in touch with. But yes, that whole sense of saving yourself for marriage and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was definitely in my mind excluded from that group of the girls who were had not had something like this happen to them. It was already, even though it wasn't anything I had control over, it was still a done thing. It was
But you
yeah.
were made to feel guilty even in the church because that was not something you had to offer your potential spouse.
Well, at that
So
point, it wasn't something anybody knew but me. Like
I
I was
know.
carrying that inside. But yes, absolutely. The theology around that was definitely something of which you had an internal awareness that something wasn't right with you. You weren't in that category of the pure people that were, saving
Yeah.
themselves. And you were
Yeah.
already, yeah.
Well, therein lies the damage of that. One of the reasons that message is so damaging is because there are so many things that happen to so many people that they don't even have a choice in the matter. There's no control. Their control is taken away, and yet they're made to feel less than. They're made to feel
Right.
damaged because of that message. It's such a horrible message.
And that's a carryover from, the purity culture is a carryover from the Old Testament. And when you have, a direct reference, like I don't remember which you might remember better, but when the verse says, our righteousness is as filthy rags, those
It's in Isaiah.
rags are
Yeah.
menstrual cloths. That's what they are referencing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that sort of menstrual taboo and that whole weird purity thing around, women's menstruation and, not being looked in the eye, all those kinds of things carried right on into the evangelical purity culture, into this idea of taintedness,
Right.
surrounding sex. Yeah.
So the rapes stopped at age 14 abruptly when your dad found the Lord.
Yes.
And then you were expected as a teenage girl to just sit next to him in church, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And everything's okay now because God has wiped his sins away as far as the east is from the west. What do you remember feeling about that as a teenage girl?
I remember being extremely confused. I mean, we literally went from doing what we were doing on Sunday afternoons to having fellowship dinner at the Mennonite church. And he was in tight with these people and they were surrounding him and hearing his stories. And he loved being the center of their attention. And they gave him big fat dinners and after church dinners. And I was basically, told to run along and play with my, youth group friends or the kids of the people, whoever we were visiting at the church, or if it was in the church, my church involvement there, kind of coincided with his sort of distancing himself from me completely and sort of immersing himself in this world of these other people and his Bible. And I remember feeling extremely confused about that because I didn't dislike going to church, and I thought, the people were all seeming to show me a lot of love and, a lot of also personal interest, but he wasn't. So it wasn't like we were moving into this like better, stronger relationship. It was like I was a piece of his past that he had to just keep. So he just stayed away from me all the time. So
Because he knew it was. I mean, I'm sure at some level he knew it was wrong, even if his sickness drove him to do it. I mean, obviously, a sick person, it takes a sick person to do that. We know that.
Right.
But after he came to the Lord, so to speak, he wanted to avoid the whole subject because he wanted that to just be washed away.
Yes.
And
right.
when you approached him about it, he would admonish you that you needed to forgive him, right?
Yes. He was a new man in Christ, and I had no right to bring up his past and remind him of who he used to be. And, how dare I do that? And I called myself a Christian. So, so that was it. He took that faith and sort of turned it back on me. And that was kind of the my brother and his wife were also very steeped in that culture. And so that was their mentality as well. That, it was something that was, we were supposed to leave that alone. That was my problem. I needed to get over my bitterness. And
well, at that point though, how many people even knew that this had
not
happened?
too many. But there were absolutely some, because I had to move out of his house. We had a 1-bedroom apartment. I was in his apartment at this point, and I wouldn't sleep in the same bedroom. So I went downstairs and slept on the floor in the living room. And, so I was trying to say without saying that why I couldn't stay there. And I talked to the guidance counselor because I had mono and I was sick for a month, and he wouldn't get my homework from school. And I was kind of trying to get across the message, like, I can't live here. But I also didn't want to go in foster care. Mm-hmm. And so I remember another young couple from the church. They put me up for a while in their trailer. They were a very young married couple and having their first or second, maybe they had a baby and another on the way, I don't know. But everybody kind of knew, like, it was this weird unspoken thing. Like, I would say, like, something happened, and then they would be like, oh, it was kind of like, and then, they'd kind of like scramble around and try to figure out what to do. Like, everyone
people in the church were doing this, or the people in the school?
When I couldn't live with him, the people in the church were kind of catching on to what his past sins actually were.
But no one ever came to you and said, let us get you some help.
No, heavens no. They'll find me a place to live. So, they passed me around, and then my brother's wife's parents took me in. I mean, I look back and I feel like it was I'm just like kind of astounded. Like, they're just, cause they're all trying to seem like they're doing this good Christian thing. And yet no one is confronting him. No one is like, actually, if you pressed me enough at that point, I probably would have like been more forthcoming. I think we're talking about like just maybe high school time at this time. Maybe I'm 16-ish at this point. Because I wanted it out. I confronted him about it. So, there was just, there were people that kind of knew and that were instead like making sure, he stayed out of the picture, like protected, so to speak, let's get her out of there. He had my uncle come and go through my things and told my uncle that I must be on drugs because I was saying things about him that weren't true. This was after the confrontation. So that was clever. And it took me till I was in therapy to figure out why he did that. Obviously looking back, it's like, duh, everybody was sort of finding ways to do damage control and just keep a lid on this thing. So Pat could keep being the star Christian, and I could keep moving on with my life.
Genevieve, you have smoke coming out of your ears. You're so angry.
Yeah, it's been a lot of deep breaths. I'm perpetually astounded that you can talk so freely about this, because I just, something that really bothers me about the theology is it demonizes anger to the point where things just don't get done.
Mhm.
And it puts this forgiveness up on a pedestal. And when you think that every sin is equal, it doesn't matter, like we were saying, Dave, it doesn't matter if you tell a white lie or if you literally rape your child for 6 years. I'm
Right.
just so
It's all
all
the
the
same in
same.
God's
by
eyes.
that.
In
That's
God's
right.
eyes, it's
All the
all
Level
the
playing
same.
same.
field. I've heard it
And
over and over again a million times. Yeah.
that just it makes me so angry. And I wish that, these people, when they're thinking that they're doing the good Christian thing by just moving you around to, keep you away from your dad, and without, if somebody could just, I wish that somebody could just go back in time and listen to you and get angry and say, oh my gosh, that is not okay. And we're going to do something right now, because anger, like righteous anger, exists. It's not even like it doesn't exist in the Bible. People talk about Christ's righteous anger all the time. And yet when
Right.
it's so warranted, like in this situation, I want to throw something.
Yeah. I still think that. And I do know even some Christians that have responded that way, like with that kind of anger and frustration, like this isn't right. This would have never happened on my watch kind of thing. And I'd like to think that less of it is happening now, although statistics aren't bearing that out at all, unfortunately. And it's,
Well,
a lot of
yeah.
the key is just learning how to make it like everyday language, and how to help kids understand, like, you can say this, like, and this is never your fault. And you can tell the adults, and you can, that's a big part of it. But yeah, you're right. The theology, when Dave said the church covered it up. Okay. So we were talking a little bit in the preliminary to this about what it means for the church to cover something up, and how people think immediately that means everybody knew and nobody did anything. And that's not quite how it usually plays out. It's usually a little bit different, in terms of the dynamics and the interactions of the people involved to the theology being taught that functions to silence and to keep it covered up. It's not as simple as just like, oh, these people knew and didn't call the police. It's what they're doing with how the worldview is framing the entire situation, and what they're doing about that. I mean,
the theology is the mindset within that theology. It allows people to never have to deal with the consequences of their poor behavior. And when you can just pray a prayer and it's forgiven, then you never have to go and make it right, or to deal with what that costs people that you hurt.
Yeah, one of the things I asked this pastor that we had such a lengthy interaction with was, is it anywhere in the Bible that after you make things right with God, that there would be any other consequences for something you've done? It's actually not. I mean, there's literally no examples in there where once things have been made right with God, somebody still goes to jail or gets dragged off to, there's like one little verse that says, if you haven't made this right with so-and-so, then don't try to make it right with me, or whatever. But there really isn't anything to suggest that a person, once they've confessed everything to God, I mean, as I've often said with him, he was actually doing, in the most literal sense, the truth of what they taught. They literally teach that once you're born again, everything you did before is done. So too bad for whatever it leaves in the minds of the people they've done whatever to. That's just
he got to get out of jail free card. And
sure.
I think you've mentioned that there's some suspicion in your mind that he saw that as a convenient out, and that he even gravitated toward that because it gave him such an easy escape.
Yeah, I mean, and my brother was also working on him for like years, because my brother had met the Mennonite girl, and so was constantly at my dad with, you need to get saved, you need to get saved, same as he did to me. So, enough of that, coupled with, whatever mental illness, guilty conscience, I don't know, whatever he was walking around with, eventually gave way.
So in the documentary, you mentioned that after how long was it between the time the abuse stopped and your dad passed away?
6 years, maybe something like that. Six years about. Mm,
And
7 maybe.
after your dad died, that's when things kind of got triggered for you. You had managed to kind of start putting a life together. You got married young, and started trying to have a life. And then when your dad passed away, the shit really hit the fan for you emotionally, right?
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Or did the
Yeah, I mean, I
therapist?
can't speak for other people, but I honestly think in my own, there's a weird attachment that happens with perpetrators and their victims. And I think with his death, there was a severance of that attachment. And the attachment, although it was sick and an unhealthy attachment, was keeping me together. Like in a way, like, okay, say you have if you had a healthy parental attachment, and that would enable you to have healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an incestuous relationship with a key parent, when that gets severed, there's nothing, like you're floundering. Like the internal structure of your psychological makeup kind of unravels, because
Mm-hmm.
their ownership of you is what determines how you act and behave. That's the best way I can put it. You are their object. And so you know where you fit in that dynamic.
Right.
When the owner, it's like a dog with their owner in a way. It's a bizarre analogy, but when that person is gone, it's like, and the thing is severed, you don't know who you are, what you're supposed to do. Like, they were the one who, and this is all very subconscious. I mean, mind you, it's not like they're calling you up every day and saying, here's what I want you to do today. It's a structure in your thought processes and in your psychological makeup. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I also think a lot of it is safety too, as far as emotions being able to surface. And suddenly I was allowed to tell, like, because he wasn't, in my mind, he wasn't saying, don't you ever tell anybody. He was dead. Like, so there was nothing anymore to stop me from actually saying it in a big way. And
there was a fear that you wondered, he had warned you not to tell anyone. There was a fear in you all those years, like, what would he do if I did say,
right.
Maybe, am I afraid if he can do this, would he kill me? I mean, I'm sure
when I was very young, I think I definitely thought that was a possibility. I don't know if I thought that so much as I got a little bit older. I, got a little more savvy about that sort of thing, but maybe subconsciously, and because it did start occurring at such a young age, I may have thought that. I think more than anything, I was probably thinking he had the power to twist it and make it my fault, because it already felt like my fault, and that he was going to be sure to frame it in such a way that everybody would know that I did this, that this was because of me, or something I did, or
and even more shame. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to get to more of your therapy and recovery, and the therapist that, in my view, literally saved your life. I mean, I just love this guy. And in the documentary, I just am I'm amazed that he was able to do such incredible things with you and literally change the course of your life. And I'm sure you would agree that if you hadn't run into him, it's a good bet that you might not be here today.
Oh, I'm certain of it. Yeah.
I'm just amazed.
I had even been trying to recover, like, through Christian recovery programs.
Good luck with that.
Right. Yeah. I found it, it was horrible. I mean, it was just.
Well, I want to get this call. There's a couple calls, and I think I know who this is. Dee in Arkansas, her, wanted to mention her experience with church, and she relates to Marcia's experience with the topic. So let me see. Is this Deborah?
Yes.
Hey, Deborah. Dee, I used to know you as, just a little history. I go way back with this young lady. When I was a pastor in Arkansas, I actually performed the wedding of her and her husband, Bobby. And then So I bear some responsibility for the shit show that followed after that. But Dee, what did you want to talk about tonight with Marcia and Genevieve and I? Thanks for calling in.
It's been emotional to listen to you talk, especially about how with the church, when your father got saved and everybody's just like, oh, it's all about forgiveness. Let's, we got to forgive. And that's what God does, is everybody's got to forgive.
Yep. But
they never acknowledge and own the consequences, and you deal with that. I was abused by my dad, not to the extent that you suffered. I can barely remember. The 2 occasions that I can remember were enough. But my daughter was molested by my husband.
Oh, God.
And he was a good Christian man. I met him in church, married him,
I'm so
and
sorry.
we had 3 kids together. And my daughter, I suspected something, but he was an expert at gaslighting me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept saying, well, you're just crazy in your head. You're just messed up in your head because of what happened with your dad. You're projecting that on me. And it really messed with my head. And then my daughter told me something happened, and I flat out took her aside, had that conversation, and that was a really hard conversation to have
Absolutely.
with a 13-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to tell me that this had happened to her, but I believed her.
Oh,
I knew.
you're a good mom.
I took her and I took my other kids, and I went to a relative, and I was like trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I had a good friend that referred me to it was a child advocacy center, and they recorded her statement. And the police looked at her statement, and they arrested him. And I blew up my life and my family.
But you saved your daughter.
You did the right thing.
I had a lot of
thing.
I had a lot of his family coming at me saying, we can, could have been done differently. And I'm like, no.
Nope.
And he went to jail.
That's what had to happen.
Years and served the
I
whole
can't even
sentence.
imagine how hard that had to be. I'm so glad to hear you say that, though. I mean, that's really, really.
Marcia, are you wondering what would have happened differently in your life if someone had advocated for you like that?
Oh,
all those
absolutely.
years ago?
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's a powerful thing, and you're going to have this bond with her, and she's going to know how much she matters and what her value is as a human being. And there's no replacement for that. I mean, she's not going to have to, struggle to find it and, have to come from total strangers, people that aren't in her family. And yeah, so that's really, I'm so proud of you for doing that. And I'm so grateful that you did it. It's huge, huge.
I just see so much. It's really what led me to my deconversion, and just not, because I'm like, how can people say, oh, you just need to forgive and you need to have mercy and all of this stuff. And then on the other side, I'm watching all the trauma that this has caused, not just my daughter that it happened to, but my other kids, and what that put us through.
Yep.
And how people in the church, they just don't want to, oh, let's not talk about that. And I mean, it continues to this day, because I talked to Dave about it. I was so angry, because you've got Josh Duggar, and everybody was all protective, and they're just like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just sexual curiosity. No, he molested his sisters. All the signs are there, and those girls are so brainwashed, and they don't think nothing happened to him, that it was just natural curiosity. No, he molested you, and you're brainwashed. It's sickening to me that they still do it today.
Yep.
And it triggers me. When I see stuff like that, I get so angry. Because
Right.
they're just like, oh, it's, you know, he's working on himself. He's praying. Well, I
Right.
don't
Oh my
care.
God. I
He needs
know.
to go to jail.
I read a quote one time about how if everyone who perpetrated were brought to justice, the fabric of society would unravel. You know, that this is it's so prevalent, and so many people do not pursue justice for the victims. They're sitting together at the holiday tables, and they're still, looking across the table at Uncle Larry or whoever. And, because maybe they're going to lose income, and maybe they're going to, they're looking at all these other factors, and so they keep making excuses, and it just perpetuates the whole problem. And, I'm like, let it unravel, let the fur fly, whatever. We'll have to rebuild from the ashes, or whatever's going to happen there, because it's just, yeah, it's the trauma just keeps getting recycled and embedded and recycled. And yeah.
Well, Deborah, I know that. How hard was, I know you believed your daughter, but was there a time when you wondered, what do I do here? Who do I believe? But was there a time of confusion? Was there, take us through that process, because you did a hard thing and the right thing, but it was incredibly hard for you because you knew it was going to blow everything up.
I never doubted her. I had such horrible guilt because I was with somebody that, he was just not a good husband, and I had tried to leave, but had financially could not take care of myself and 3 kids, so I had to bide my time, so to speak. And I went to nursing school and became a nurse, and was like, making my nest someplace else, just trying to bide my time to get out of it, because we didn't love each other anymore, but he was just a control freak and possessive, and it wasn't a matter of him loving me. It was a matter of, you're my property. This is mine, and you belong to me. These kids belong to me, and you don't get to make choices. And I just wanted to get myself in a good position to get out. And when it happened, I had to get those plans going, and it just made me have such horrible guilt, because I thought, if I just left earlier, if I just would have just, if I just had resources, if I just weren't able to do that, then I could have prevented it from happening.
It's not your fault.
No, it's not.
God bless her.
You did all the right things because you believed her, and once you believed her, you set that whole wheel in motion. And I cannot imagine how hard that was. And it speaks volumes of what kind of person you are, that you did that. How many people don't. They just don't. They don't believe it. They'll put it back on the person, the kid or the victim. And yeah.
You're not responsible for what you don't know. And when you did know something, you did the right thing, Deborah. And that's all you can hold on to. That's the truth that you're responsible for, is what you're aware of. And I've been so proud of you. It's been hard. I know it has. I wish I'd have never married you guys back then. I didn't know. I mean,
that was not your fault.
I know. I should have known, right? No, we don't know what we don't know. And Marcia and I've talked before about this, and I think you've got some good insight, Marcia. The whole evangelical, patriarchal, misogynistic culture breeds this shit. It's just a breeding ground for this women are property mentality, and I'm the boss of this place, and you got to submit to me. And it breeds that stuff, and I think it draws people toward that who are attracted to that mindset.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I know, there's theologically, they try to push the idea of complementarianism, or whatever that is. That's supposed to be that's supposed to be the better way to look at it, or whatever. But yeah.
No, it's not. And
It's
so,
still a watered down version of
right.
the hierarchical structure there. Yeah.
Well, I know this is hard for you, Deb, to talk about this subject. I know you called me when the Duggar verdict came out and how triggering that was for you and how angry it makes you. And what you're doing is right, though, because you're allowing that anger to fuel your righteous anger, if you will, to speak up about this stuff and to not stay quiet and to not just roll over and take it. And so that's why Marcia does what she does, to speak out against it. And that's why you're doing what you do, Deb.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I appreciate Marcia telling your story, because I wanna watch your documentary. I haven't seen it. This was when I heard about it, when I started watching the podcast, and want to see if my daughter will watch it too. She's been in therapy and she's doing really well. All the kids are doing well. I'm proud of all my kids after everything that they've all been through, to come out unscathed and healthy humans with healthy minds. But it's always there. And you just, one thing, and I ask this of you as a survivor of abuse, don't you feel like that your whole brain is altered? You just don't think the way other people think.
Mm-hmm.
You're suspicious when other people aren't.
Uh-huh.
And I have people kind of frown at me about that, but I just have a healthy suspicion of everybody around me. And I don't want to disconnect from people or alienate people, but it's hard trusting people, because it's especially people that want to come, well, they're such a good Christian. That just makes me just trust you more, because I don't believe that shit.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I really had to I had to come around to not making the word Christian be equivalent to,
Abuser.
something like that. Yeah. And sometimes I go too far the other way. Like my husband will say, sometimes I am too trusting, that I can sometimes fail to see the flags. Certain things will get past me because of what was put over on me. Because he'll catch it sometimes and be like, no, something's up with that person, like we're, he'll have a bit more insight than I do. So it just depends. And sometimes I am the one who gets the vibe immediately and, feels like something's
But you said, you made that statement in your documentary that almost exactly word for word what Deborah just said, that your mind works differently.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That is 100%
because of
true.
that trauma.
Well,
right.
And they've shown like our neurology is completely rewired from early childhood trauma. And so you're not going to get it to be like someone who didn't have your experiences. I thought that for a long time. I wanted to be normal, quote unquote. And now I respect the fact that I have PTSD. It's not in my lifetime. It's not ever going to be completely eradicated. I can say it doesn't interfere with my life and I'm doing pretty well and, all that kind of thing. But I also know the times when it's, right in front of my face, that it's still there and I'm full out triggered and, there's more work to be done or, it's always a progression, but I no longer hold the idea that I won't be happy unless I'm, normal or unless all of these triggers are done away with or whatever, because that's just not true. You can learn to live with your hyper suspicion and you've earned that and you've come by it honestly. And so it's not necessarily something to hold in, a bad light, instead you just have this respect like, hey, if I make my husband get out of bed at 2:00 in the morning because, I heard the least little sound or whatever, which is one of my things, that I have some paranoia around sounds in the night or whatever, that I just respect that, and if something does happen, it takes me a lot more hours than, unless I have, a gummy or something, to calm down from whatever just happened, than anybody else does. They're all like back to bed and everything's fine. And I'm still pacing the floors like, oh my God. So,
Yeah, you're right though. You came by that honestly. And But Deb, thank you for calling, and it was so good to get to not meet you, but to see you again after all these years. Bevan and I got to stop in and see Deb in Arkansas when we were through on a road trip a year or so ago, and it was just so good to see that you've come out the other side of this, and you're doing well, and you're doing well.
amazing.
You're doing well with your kids, and I'm so proud of you, Deborah. So proud
Me
of you.
too.
Me too.
I'm glad to meet you. I'm so glad you called in.
Thank you.
That just like hearing that was so heartening. Made my day.
Oh,
Seriously, made my day.
Oh, God. Thank you. Well,
thank you, Deborah.
I really enjoyed speaking to y'all too.
Well, be sure you watch the documentary. I won't say you'll enjoy it, but it's
I'm definitely going to.
it's an important thing to watch. And by the way, everyone, the link is in the chat. Deborah, I'll let you go. We got a couple more calls. I appreciate you calling. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
I'm so, did I get her muted? I think, there we go. Here we go. Yeah, she's doing so well, and I'm so proud of her. The link to the documentary. Thank you for your super chat, Mario. Appreciate that, everybody. Just so much I want to get to, and I'm just that was a great call. I'm so glad she called us in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm so glad she did too. And I also, not only, just really quickly, not only am I so proud of her for blowing up her life and saving her daughter and listening to her daughter and doing all of the right things, but I'm also just so proud of her daughter.
Yes.
Because something that we've talked about too is that there's so much shame. And I feel like sometimes children, especially when they're young, especially when this is happening at a time in their life where it's not what you're normally introduced to. It's well before puberty. There can be just this shame about telling an adult, or you might not want to upset your parents because you don't want them to feel icky or talk about your privates, or let them think that they've done a bad job. And so I'm so proud of Dee's daughter too.
Mhm.
Yes.
They're
Well
both
said.
amazing.
Mhm.
Well, I've got another call I want us to take. There's a couple calls, and they're coming in fast and furious now, but this one especially to deal with the subject of shame. We've got Mindy. No, it said Alaska before, but is it Arkansas? Anyway, we'll find out. She, her, atheist, how she managed to overcome shame. So this is something I know your therapist really helped you through. Mindy, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Dave.
Hey, Mindy, I said Alaska
Hey.
before, but I don't know if it's Arkansas or Alaska. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's Arkansas.
Oh, we got Arkansas
I've talked
on
to
the
you a
map
few
tonight.
times before.
Okay. Hey, good to have you on the show. What did you have? You had a question for
Hey.
Marcia about shame.
Yeah. So I don't know, I guess I can relate a lot to what you're saying. Even though, like, I had a really excellent childhood and I didn't have any, trauma or anything as a child. I was actually in college when I was sexually assaulted.
Mhm.
And so that was like almost 11 years ago. And so even though I was, an adult, I still just felt, a lot of shame, which, seems silly because it's like I didn't do anything wrong. But, none of my family even knows to this day. Some of my friends do, but I really don't talk about it with my friends. And I don't know. What were some ways that you, I guess, learn to overcome your shame? And I'm even a little nervous about saying this on this platform because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if somebody I know ends up listening to it or something? I don't know. But I guess what did you do to overcome some of that? And I guess how long did it take you to really kind of completely work through that feeling?
Well, I mean, it sounds like when you're talking about if you feel exposed, like shame is usually you're having a feeling of exposure to people that, revealing some part of yourself that you're not ready maybe or want people to see. There's different kinds of shame. So I mean, I'm not sure specifically, what, if sometimes the shame from assault is related to our sexuality and how we feel about ourselves sexually, and the fact that there's such a vulnerability involved in having that happen against your will. Can get all sorts of things can get inflated or conflated, I should say, in there in terms of how we feel about our bodies and, what actually happened and what was going on in our minds at the time. And I worked with a therapist, and it did take quite a long time. I worked with him for a number of years, but I also, did a lot of writing. And I think, I don't know, for one point, you don't have to tell anybody you don't want to. There's that, it's certainly, true. It's not an indication of wellness necessarily that you're willing to just spew it off to the whole world or be public with it. But on the other hand, if there is like something, if you're aware of something inside of you that prevents you from being able to share it in times when you really want to, then that's probably what you want to pursue, maybe therapeutically, or kind of go after in your own mind to sort of get at what is that about, and then you kind of have to do a little internal research and try to figure out, what is it, something like that you think you could have done to stop it? Is it something that you think was related to your body or how you look, or because it can just have so many different facets and different forms.
Yeah, it's almost like
I think one of the things.
Go ahead, Mindy.
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, it's like whenever you said, shame on wondering whether or not you could have stopped it, like that kind of, I guess, rings a bell, because I don't know, I always, I guess, have felt pretty tough. Like, I have a 3rd-degree black belt and I'm trained in martial arts, and I had this whole idea of like, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I was supposed to be able to, do something about this. Like, mm-hmm. And I guess part of me was like, well, if I tell, the people that I love, like my parents and stuff, who, obviously worried about me when I went off to college, just like any parent would, but it was kind of like, well, I don't want to let them down because I was supposed to be able to, prevent this, or,
Yeah, that's the troubling part to me that you women have to deal with. It makes me so fucking angry at fucking men. Fuck men. Because we don't have to check the garage when we get out of the car. And we don't have to walk with keys in our hands but the whole sexual abuse and it feels to me like the sexual part is the part that brings the shame. Because think about it, if I get mugged and robbed on the street, I'm not hiding that knowledge. I'm not afraid to talk about that. Mm-hmm. I'm not ashamed of that, as though I caused that and I could have prevented that. But if you get raped or sexually assaulted as a woman, there's this inherent shame you have to carry that, oh, I caused him to do that. Mm-hmm. Something I did, asked for it. Is that a part of it? Because I'm just so fucking angry right now.
I think that,
like, 100%. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, that's completely, like, I always have my keys in between my knuckles. Like, I'm paranoid about, like, making sure that my door is, constantly locked. Like, and that's just not even, like, I've been, like, followed in Walmart, and, like, all sorts of just weird bullshit that doesn't even necessarily go into assault, but, like, just, bullshit
harassed.
That a lot of,
right.
Women and men have to deal with every day. And it's just, it's
well, no, it's mostly women. It's mostly women by men. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, I do think that there's a few reasons why I personally, I see so much shame around talking about this, and it does feel like, in general in society, we have a lot of shame around sexuality. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of shame around women just being sexual in the first place, even if it's fucking consensual.
Absolutely.
But then we also
Mhm.
have this society of victim blaming, and it kind of goes back to, you should have known better. You shouldn't have gone out dressed like this. You shouldn't have gotten drunk. Why didn't you watch your drink? Why did you, all of these different things. But then
You're
it's also
responsible for
still,
it.
it's putting the onus on women and not putting the onus on men to just not do these things.
Yeah, just don't
And
be an
it's
asshole.
yeah, it's so frustrating. And I think I'm so glad that Marcia said that you don't have to tell anybody if you don't want
Yeah.
to. Like, this is your life. This is your trauma. This is your thing for you to deal with how you see fit. If you do think that speaking up or talking about it can be healing,
Mhm.
I know that is often the case, even though it's really hard. It's kind of that cliche sort of, weight off of your chest.
Yeah.
And something that you can keep in mind is that, if you're ashamed because you feel like this shouldn't have happened to you, you are not alone. This happens
No.
to people all the time. And if you would like to speak out and if you would like the strength to do it, you can just remember that by talking about it, you can be showing somebody else that it is okay to talk about, that we go through these things, that this has happened to. I genuinely don't think I know a single woman who has not gone through this, either as an adult or as a child.
Sad. True. Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
One thing that you said when like I'm picking up on this, you mentioned your parents and the idea of telling your parents and not wanting to let them down. There's something in that I think is worth exploring, because I think what's happening is, I think we're really talking about, when you're unable to and we all know, well, those of us who experience know, when you can't act to stop it, which we can't, and fear is in control. And sometimes our survival is in control because we are afraid, and the safest thing to do sometimes is comply. And so I think there's something that I'm hearing, that you're kind of wanting your parents to understand about you, that could potentially, and you're kind of thinking this in a negative, like, I don't want to let them down, but I'm thinking that the other side of that is that, should you be able to tell them, this has the potential of changing your relationship with them in an amazing way. Like, when we let someone into that place of vulnerability, and we have these preconceived ideas of how they're going to react and what the take is going to be, sometimes, and not always, I mean, sometimes it is what we expect or worse, but then there's these other times when we underestimate the love people have for us, and the empathy and compassion they can show in that very place where you need them to be. And I mean, I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your parents, but
yeah. Well,
it might be.
It's actually so unfortunately my dad actually passed in August of cancer.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
so I never told him, and the reason I didn't say I didn't want to let them down, but like, I know how much, sorry,
It's okay.
I know how much my parents love me, and I didn't want them to feel any ounce of hurt at all.
Right.
And so I was, I wanted to protect them, and I'm still glad that I didn't tell my dad, because, I don't know. I just always want to protect my mom and dad from any
That's
sort of
a
hurt.
very
And
sweet sentiment. I understand that completely.
Yeah.
But that's a hard spot you're in, and a
I-
spot you never should have been in. And I'm very,
Yeah.
very sorry that you've had to deal with this, Mindy.
If I could also just say one thing, and like I said, you can do whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think something that, with your mom that could be good to consider too is that I completely understand how you don't want to tell your parents something that they would feel hurt that something happened to their daughter and that they weren't there to protect you, or that, that knowledge could hurt them. But how do you think your mom would feel if she knew that you were suffering in silence, when she could really offer you a shoulder and somebody who can be there for you?
I mean, I know that she would. It's one of those things where it's like, my parents, like they don't necessarily, and I talk in present tense because I still feel that connection with my dad, even though he's not physically here anymore. But I feel that they don't, like in the grand scheme of things, don't care about themselves like they do, but they put their needs on the back burner for me. And then I also put my needs on the back burner for them. I told my dad so many times that I would have traded him places in a heartbeat, so they didn't have to go through the cancer. And he would always get mad at me and tell me, don't say that. I don't want to hear you say that. Like, knock it off type thing. So we've always had that relationship. So we just, look after each other, put ourselves last in a sense. So I know that my mom would, I mean, I know that she would respond appropriately, but it's still that thing where it's like, no, I want to protect her, especially now after losing my dad. And I just,
you don't want to cause her. You don't want to be the cause of her experiencing pain.
Yeah.
Totally understand that. Marcia, she mentioned shame. Mindy did. What are the? And we're gonna. By the way, we're gonna go. The producer has given me permission to go a few extra minutes tonight because this is just important stuff. But Marcia, I know that your therapist, Dr. What's his name? I forget.
Dr. B, Dr. Bulette. I just call him Dr. B.
Dr. B. And by the way, we're going to get to the next call. We got Jonathan on the phone. He called in. The producer of the documentary. So we're going to talk to him in a minute. But I want to finish up with Mindy here on this shame issue, because I know that Dr. B really helped you deal with the shame that was keeping you locked up. What do you feel like were some of the main tactics that worked with you?
I think, like he would take a scenario. For instance, there was a time when I brought a friend to my dad's, and my dad ended up molesting this friend as well as me. And that was a difficult, I thought that if she was with me, he would leave me alone. Instead, he devised this sick game and ended up molesting both of us. And it was a thing that we talked about, before she passed away. And we had it out in the open, and she told me she had told this to her father before he died. And, but he would take this situation and he would say, and cause I was really blaming myself and feeling terrible, that sure. I brought her into the, wolves den or whatever you want to call it. And he said, but what was your, he said, think about, you were trying to survive. You were trying to, in your own way, like he said, you're imposing adult ideas on what was actually going on. And he reframed it. He just said, this isn't, if you think about it in terms of you were trying to protect you and you were trying to do something that would help the situation, that's not something to feel guilty about. That's not, you didn't have the intent of taking her into this wolf's den. You weren't thinking like that, and so he would take these situations in which, it's a little different. It was more guilt than shame, perhaps, in that example, but he would reframe things. For instance, if I would talk about, I felt a lot of shame in my body developing because all this incest was taking place over the years where my body was changing a lot. And, he would just ask simple questions like, what's wrong with your body, or what's wrong with the changes that your body was undergoing, or what's wrong with being naked, like these are the kinds of things that I felt a lot of shame around because I was relating them to the circumstances of the incest. Right. And when he would sort of set it up in a different way, I would realize, that there wasn't anything shameful about me or my body, or, it helped me to separate. Like he would even say, like, theoretically in a session, you should be able to walk in here buck naked and we should be able to have a session and there should be absolutely no problem at all whatsoever, and his point was just that there's nothing shameful about our bodies or about, that being a part of who we are. There's nothing shameful about being afraid. There's nothing shameful about being paralyzed with fear or about complying for our safety or, any of the number of things that come up that we can feel such a heavy load of shame. But the other thing, shame also, it can be something that serves as a barrier to our anger and our rage, because while we're busy blaming our bodies or being in the wrong place at the wrong time or not fighting the person off, we're not getting angry at the person who did this to us. And it's kind of keeping that rage in check and keeping the thing from where it needs to go, and so it's one of those things that when you kind of step back and take a look at not just when and how you're feeling it, but also what function it might be serving, you kind of can get out on the other side of it. And then you're like, what? Like, no, this wasn't about me or my body, or, and then you get pissed, and there's a shift that happens. And, the anger also can help alleviate the shame, because once you let that anger happen, that anger can be very self-defensive. There is nothing about me to be ashamed of. Absolutely nothing. No square inch of my body is shameful. None of my sexual responses are shameful, and you get, you just get up on top of that and
sounds like
take the offensive.
This doctor knew this was amazing for you, I think, and it was pretty awesome. Mindy, does that help a bit?
Yeah, that does. Honestly, it's helped just like talking to you guys a lot.
Oh man,
actually.
that's cool. We need to do more of this.
I'm really glad you did call, and I'm sorry you went through that. And I know you're processing it and getting the help you need to move forward. And I'm glad you could call in and talk to Marcia, because Marcia has done the hard work to get healthy and happy, and it can be done, and I'm proud of you for working on it, Mindy.
Thank you.
You stay in touch. Thank you for calling in tonight.
Thanks, Mindy.
All
I really
right.
enjoyed talking to you.
I will, Dave.
Hang
Thank
in there.
you.
All righty.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
All right, let's take this call from Jonathan. And he's going to take the password protection off the documentary.
Cool.
Jonathan, hello. Are you there?
Good. Hello, David. How are you?
Hey, Jonathan. How are you, man? Thanks for calling in tonight.
I'm doing well. David, how are you? And Guinevere, how are you?
We're good. We're you did a great job on that documentary, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just calling to say, first of all, and I also want to say, of course, hello to Marcia. Marcia, you sound amazing. I'm listening to you, and I'm just thinking, like, boy, I'm just so grateful to have been able to work with you in telling this story.
Thank you for
and I also want to say to David and to Guinevere that I think you guys are doing an incredible job holding a space for this conversation. It's been a really powerful conversation to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you calling attention to it and making this film. What was it like for you to have to work through this really difficult story and all the hours that it took to film and edit and do those? How hard was that for you personally? For me, I just think I would have been back and forth between angry and a bucket of tears the whole time, and I wouldn't have gotten the film made. How did you fucking do it?
Well, first of all, with a lot of help from amazing collaborators, from Marcia, and so from sorry, go ahead, Marcia.
I was just going to say he was in his own process. He had a lot of stuff going on, and it was kind of there was a lot of common ground, not the same, like not incest, but just life stuff. And I think that helped.
Yeah.
That's what brought me to the story, was I was sort of, I was going through a divorce, and I was really struggling with that. And I was kind of looking forward at my life, and I was losing a conversation about how I was going to end up being a happy person. And I, through kind of a miraculous turn of events, I came across Marcia, and we met and spoke, and I didn't know about her story. I just kind of, as I think you can see, and the folks who are listening to the show and calling into the show can see, she has an incredible kind of presence and aura about her, and that fascinated me. And so that was my way in, and that was what kept. It's true. I can't see you right now because I'm on the phone, so I don't know if you're working at me, Marcia.
I'm beautiful. That's all you need to know. I'm absolutely radiant right now, so you can just visualize that.
1000%.
But that was my way in, and that was what kept bringing me back. And so, and I was fortunate enough to work with some terrific co-directors, Nora Mandre, in particular, Jason Cole, Smokey Nelson, Nicholas Oddie, all core collaborators in this project in different ways. And so it was, to Marcia's point, though, it was absolutely it was a journey of healing for me too. And so that's what kind of kept bringing me back. And I also just want to say, in terms of whatever struggle that I endured in making the film, and now trying to bring it out into the world, it's insignificant compared to the experiences that other people have had. And so that's, I think, really important to make very clear. Compared to you talking about the journey that Marcia's been on, her own healing journey and her story, what my journey is, I think of it very humbly in comparison to what she's been through and what some of the other folks who've called into the show, who have been so incredibly brave. And these conversations you guys have been having have been amazing, so powerful. So I also genuinely don't want to take up a lot of airtime on this show, because I think those other voices are more important than mine.
Well, I really appreciate you calling, though,
so
and
I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I just know it must have been a hard subject to tackle in making a film. It's just a difficult subject matter all the way around, and it takes a lot of courage to be willing to do that. Well, good.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I'll vouch for that. It was great, though. He did great. It was.
I had no idea what I was getting into.
Did you? You mentioned that you could take the password protection off of it so people can access it more easily.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So I already did that. While you guys were talking, I pulled the password protection off, and then in the chat to this, I'll put the link in there.
Awesome.
And then folks can just can use that to watch the film. There's no password protection on it. It's just a Vimeo link.
Good.
And then please feel free to share it with anyone who would benefit by watching the film. I think one of the things creatively that we tried to do was show that, I think a point that you made earlier in this conversation, Dave, is that it can be done. And maybe not everyone's ready to hear that at their point in their journey. And that makes perfect sense. But if you are ready to hear it, it can be done. And Marcia's story is kind of testament to that. And so it's like, we really tried very hard to not pull any punches in terms of the raw reality of the story. And Dave, you and Guinevere have done an amazing job in terms of leading Marcia through, and Marcia, your bravery in retelling the story tonight has been amazing. But we wanted to show that essentially there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so, spoiler alert, there's a happy ending.
Yes.
Well, the fact that she's here on this show
what brought me to it.
Yeah. The fact that she's here on the show says that it's a happy ending. And, this is, that what I like about the film, John, is that you didn't pull any punches on telling the story, but it does focus more on the recovery aspect and what Marcia went through to get healthy again and to show her healthy. And that last bit when you interview Giles and he breaks down, I just fucking lose it every time. Because that's just like, it's just like this happy ending and there's rainbows and butterflies. And I'm thinking, you know, the sunset and it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. I was so happy seeing that ending and meeting Giles and just, you know, because you said it totally right, Marcia. You do have this aura and it's just this energy. There's something that is just so calming about your presence, which is, you know, just the way you just said cool. I don't know what it is about it, but like you and Giles are just seeing you both smiling at the end. I was so happy about that. But then another thing that happened, I tend to think that I am somebody who is like very forgiving and empathetic with people who are in different stages of their life. But when at the very end, when you're interviewing, you know, Pat's friends from church who said that they'll remember him as a good man and that he is in heaven. I was so happy for you and then so angry about that. And I never thought that I would be angry about somebody wishing somebody else well. It's just, you know,
that's been my that's the paradox and the dilemma to live with that. It's hard, very hard.
Well, we do.
The character in the film. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just going to cut us off in a minute, but say one last thing and then I'll let you go because we're running out of time. Go ahead.
Go
ahead.
I'm just going to say, because I think there's other voices that are more important than mine that need to be using this space. So I just want to thank you guys again for creating the time, creating the space, and doing such an incredible job with this conversation. Marcia,
thanks for calling in, John.
Thanks for calling in, and thanks for letting people see the film. I think people will like it. Good night, Jonathan. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I will drop the unpassword protected link in the chat. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Ethan let us go a little over, but we do have to bail out of here because he has a show to produce right after this one, and I don't want to be sensitive to that. But oh my God, this such an important conversation, Marcia. Thank you. And spoiler alert, it has a happy ending. So the people who have to wade through the tough part of the film, just know that there's a good ending coming.
For sure.
And Marcia, I'm so proud to call you a friend. I just am.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. You are one of my heroes too.
Well, you're one of mine, and I just I'm such a fan of yours, and I'm so glad that we got to tell your story here tonight. We didn't cover a lot of it, but people can watch the film and get the parts that we missed. But
and I'll come back on anytime. So you just
thank you for being brave and courageous and raising your voice and calling attention to this much needed subject that we have to deal with because it's not going away.
Nope.
But thanks everyone for tuning in. Marcia, love you. Genevieve, love you.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Viewers, thank you for being here. And that is our show for this week.
Okay.